You just picked up your BMW. The steering wheel still has that plastic-tight new leather grip. The service advisor shook your hand, told you to enjoy it, and said the same line every advisor says: just bring it back for your first service and we'll take care of everything. What he did not tell you is that the moment you walk back through those service doors, a percentage of what gets written on your invoice will not be a repair at all. It will be an invention. A diagnosis built to look real, priced to feel urgent, and designed specifically because you do not know enough about your own car to say no. Over the next 20 minutes, I am going to walk you through 7 repairs BMW dealerships routinely invent, in order from bad to genuinely infuriating. And number 1 is not just expensive. It is the one that makes people leave 1-star reviews years after the fact, because it takes that long for most owners to figure out what actually happened to them. None of what follows means BMW builds a bad car. If anything, the opposite is true, and that is exactly what makes this so effective. A brand with a genuine reputation for engineering excellence gives an owner every reason to trust the people wearing the uniform in the service department. And that trust is precisely the raw material this entire business model runs on. Let's get into it. Number 7. The battery that tests perfectly fine but gets flagged for replacement anyway. Here is how this one works. You bring your BMW in for an oil service. Nothing is wrong. No warning lights. The car starts every single morning without hesitation. But when you pick it up, there is a line item on the invoice. Battery health at 82%. Replacement recommended. Most owners see a percentage next to the word battery and assume it means the battery is failing. It does not mean that. BMW's onboard system does not just measure whether a battery holds a charge. It also tracks something called registration status, which exists because modern BMWs use smart charging profiles that need to know the battery's age and internal resistance to manage the electrical system correctly. An 82% reading is not a battery on its way out. It is a battery that has simply logged enough charge cycles that the system starts flagging it for monitoring. Dealerships know most owners cannot tell the difference between a monitoring flag and a failure warning, and a battery replacement on a BMW is not cheap. You are looking at $300 to $500 depending on the model, because it is not just swapping a battery, it is also registering the new one to the vehicle's electrical system, which the advisor will list as a separate coding fee. Here's the counter move. Ask for the actual cold cranking amps reading, not the percentage. Any independent shop with a real battery tester can pull that number in under 2 minutes for free. If the cranking amps are within spec for your battery's rating, that battery has years left in it regardless of what percentage shows up on the dealer's screen. I have seen the exact same 82% reading appear on a battery that was 11 months old and on a battery that was 4 years old, because the number is tied more to how the diagnostic software wants to categorize the battery than to how much life is actually left in it. The percentage is a conversation starter for the advisor. It is not a verdict on your battery. And that's just the smallest one on this list. Wait until you see what they do with your brakes. Number 6. The brake fluid flush pushed as urgent at every single visit. This is the one nearly every BMW owner has experienced without realizing it. You come in for a routine service, and the advisor tells you the brake fluid has absorbed moisture and needs to be flushed immediately, today, before you leave the lot. It sounds serious because brake fluid absorbing moisture is a real phenomenon. Brake fluid is hygroscopic, meaning it does pull water out of the air over time, and that water does lower the boiling point of the fluid. All of that is true. What is not true is that this needs to happen at every 12-month service. BMW's actual factory interval for brake fluid replacement is every 2 years, not every year, and definitely not at every single visit regardless of how recently it was done. The trick dealerships use is a simple moisture test strip that reads out a percentage, and they set the threshold for what counts as urgent low enough that almost every car fails it, because the test is subjective and the equipment is calibrated by the dealership, not by BMW corporate. A brake fluid flush runs roughly $150 to $200 at a dealership. It takes 15 minutes. Multiply that by being pushed every single year instead of every 2 years over a decade of ownership, and you have paid for roughly 5 unnecessary flushes. Here's your move. Check your maintenance booklet for the actual interval listed for your model. If your last flush was under 18 months ago, decline it and ask them to write the recommendation date on your invoice instead. Watch how quickly the urgency disappears once you show you know the real schedule. What makes this one particularly effective as a business practice is that brake fluid is invisible to the owner, in a way an oil level or a tire tread never is. Nobody pops the hood and checks a hydroline reservoir for themselves, which means the entire recommendation rests on trusting a test result you never see performed, and a percentage you have no way to independently verify in the service lounge while you wait. Number 5. Carbon buildup treatments quoted on engines that show zero symptoms. BMW's direct injection engines, the N20, N26, B46, and B48 four-cylinders especially, do have a real and well-documented tendency toward carbon buildup on the intake valves. That part of the pitch is genuinely true. Because fuel is sprayed directly into the combustion chamber instead of over the valves, there is nothing washing carbon deposits off the back of those valves the way there is in an older port-injected engine. But here is where the invention comes in. A service advisor will look at a car with no misfire codes, no rough idle, no hesitation on acceleration, nothing, and still recommend an immediate walnut blasting service, which runs anywhere from $400 to $800 depending on the shop. The truth is, carbon buildup on these engines develops slowly over tens of thousands of miles, and it is something you diagnose through actual symptoms and, ideally, a borescope inspection showing you the valve condition on camera, not a guess based on mileage alone. If your car is running smooth, idling clean, and pulling normally, there is no urgent case for cleaning valves you cannot see and have no evidence are actually fouled. Ask for the borescope photos before you approve anything. A dealership that cannot produce visual evidence of carbon buildup has no business quoting you a repair for it. Owners who actually push for those photos report something interesting. A lot of the time, the shop either produces images showing mild, completely normal buildup consistent with mileage, or suddenly cannot locate the borescope at all that day. Either outcome tells you the same thing. The recommendation was built on a mileage number pulled from a chart, not on anything anyone actually looked at inside your engine. That one costs hundreds. The next one on this list costs almost nothing to fix, and they still charge you full diagnostic price for it. Number 4. Diagnostic fees charged for problems that are actually free recalls or warranty items. This is one of the more calculated moves on this list because it exploits something specific. Most owners do not check the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration recall database before they bring their car in, and they definitely do not cross-reference it against BMW's own open service campaigns. A dashboard warning light comes on, you bring the car in, and you get charged a diagnostic fee of $150 to $200 just to plug in the scanner and read the code. Except in a meaningful number of documented cases, the exact fault code that triggered the light corresponds to an open recall or a known service campaign that BMW is already obligated to fix for free. Things like certain electric water pump failures, specific airbag module concerns, and particular fuel pump issues have all been subject to recalls on various BMW model years, and a dealership that runs your diagnostic before checking your VIN against open campaigns can technically bill you for the privilege of discovering something they should have told you for free. Here's the move that costs you nothing. Before you ever book a service appointment for a warning light, plug your 17-digit VIN into the NHTSA recall lookup tool yourself. It takes 30 seconds. If there is an open recall matching your symptom, that repair, including the diagnostic time to confirm it, is legally required to be free. Do not let anyone bill you a cent for confirming something the manufacturer already owes you. What's frustrating about this particular one is that it does not even require the dealership to lie to you. They simply have to stay quiet and let you assume the diagnostic fee is standard procedure, when the honest version of that conversation would have taken them 10 seconds and cost you nothing. Number 3. The cooling system flush, recommended on a system that was serviced last visit. This one relies almost entirely on the assumption that you do not keep your own records, and unfortunately, that assumption is usually correct, because most owners trust the dealership to track their own history. Here is the pattern. You get your cooling system flushed at, say, 40,000 miles. 18 months later, at a completely separate visit, a different advisor pulls up your file, or claims to, and recommends a coolant flush and fill as part of a bundle of suggested services, priced around $150 to $250. The service history is sitting right there in the dealership's own system. They know it was done. The recommendation gets made anyway, because most owners will not push back on a service that sounds like basic maintenance rather than the same job repeated ahead of schedule. The countermove here is simple but requires a habit most owners never build. Keep a personal copy of every service invoice, either physical or in your phone, and before you approve any recommended maintenance item, check the date against your own records rather than trusting the advisor's summary. If it was done within BMW's actual interval, which for most modern models is well beyond 30,000 miles, or 4 years, whichever comes first, you say no and ask them to note your prior service date on file. This pattern tends to show up most at dealerships with heavy advisor turnover because a new face has every incentive to work off the mileage chart in front of them and none to dig through a digital file from before they were hired. It is not always malicious in the way some of the other items on this list are. But the effect on your wallet is identical either way. Quick pause here because if this is the kind of thing that makes you want to check your own invoice tonight, that instinct is exactly why this channel exists. I break down what's actually happening behind BMW service counters every week, so subscribing means you walk into your next appointment already knowing more than the person writing your invoice. We're 3 away from the one that actually made people angry enough to leave it in the reviews years after the fact. Keep that in mind, because it involves a part that cost less than your last oil change. Number 2. Run flat tire replacement pushed well before the tires actually need it, using blowout fear as the sales tool. BMW's reliance on run-flat tires is a genuine point of frustration for a lot of owners, because run-flats are more expensive to replace than conventional tires, and they wear differently, often faster on the rear axle depending on alignment and driving style. That part is legitimate. What is not legitimate is how aggressively some dealerships push replacement well ahead of the legal wear limit, using language specifically designed to scare rather than inform. You will hear phrases about how a run flat that goes below a certain tread depth becomes dangerous in a way a normal tire supposedly does not, implying an imminent blowout risk that is not supported by how these tires are actually engineered. The legal and genuinely safe minimum tread depth in the United States is 2/32 of an inch, the same standard that applies to any passenger tire, run flat or not. A set of 4 BMW run flats can run anywhere from $800 to over $2,000, depending on the model and tire brand, so pushing that replacement even 6 months early is not a small number. It is real money extracted from fear rather than fact. What makes this one sting is that run flats are already a genuine financial burden compared to conventional tires, since they cannot be patched the same way and typically need replacing in pairs or full sets, depending on the wear pattern. Owners already resent the run-flat system before they ever walk in the door, and that resentment is exactly what gets exploited when the pitch leans on the word blowout instead of a measurement. Here's your move. Carry a simple tread depth gauge in your glove box. They cost about $6, or use the built-in wear bars molded into the tire itself. If your tread is above that 2/32 mark, you are not in danger, no matter how the recommendation is phrased. Replace on your own schedule, on your own budget, based on an actual measurement, not a scare script. And now, the one I promised you at the very beginning. The reason this list exists at all. Number 1. A high-dollar, fear-based safety repair quoted as urgent, when the real problem is a $30 to $50 sensor or a simple module reset. This is the repair that generates the most angry owners, the most forum threads, and the most one-star reviews written months after the fact once someone finally figures out what happened. It usually involves the steering system, the suspension, or increasingly, the electronic parking brake, because these are systems most owners have zero visibility into and an enormous amount of fear about, because the word steering or brake attached to any warning immediately sounds like a life-or-death issue. Here is the actual mechanism behind a huge number of these cases. A steering angle sensor drifts out of calibration after something as routine as a wheel alignment or a battery disconnect. And it throws a fault code related to the electric power steering system. An electronic parking brake motor gets stuck mid-cycle because a control module needs a simple reset, not a replacement, and it throws a code that reads, on paper, exactly like a mechanical actuator failure. In both cases, the actual repair is either a recalibration procedure that takes a technician 15 minutes with the right software, or a part that costs $30 to $50. What gets quoted instead, using language about steering failure or brake failure risk, is a full module or rack replacement, priced anywhere from $1,200 to well over $3,000, framed as something you cannot safely drive without. The emotional leverage here is the entire point. Nobody wants to gamble on their steering or their brakes, so almost nobody pushes back. And that is exactly why this is saved for last on this list, and exactly why it is the most profitable invention a service department can run. Think about the asymmetry for a moment. On one side, a technician spends 15 minutes running a recalibration procedure that software already knows how to perform. On the other side, an owner sits in a waiting room being told the word failure in connection with their steering or their brakes, with two young kids possibly riding in that back seat every single day. One of those two people is making a calm business decision. The other is making a decision out of fear, and fear does not ask for a second opinion. The counter-move requires you to do one thing before you approve anything in this category. Ask for the specific fault code, not the plain English description, and look it up yourself. Or better, get a second opinion from an independent shop that can pull the same code for the cost of a diagnostic fee instead of a full repair estimate. A steering angle fault after an alignment is one of the most commonly misdiagnosed, or more accurately, most conveniently reframed issues in the entire BMW dealership network, and it is worth 30 seconds of your own research before you authorize a repair that can run into the thousands. It is also, not coincidentally, the repair category that generates the angriest reviews from owners who only found out the truth a year or two later, from an independent mechanic who looked at the same fault code and quietly asked why anyone would have quoted a full module replacement for it. Here is the uncomfortable truth underneath all 7 of these. BMW, as a manufacturer, builds genuinely excellent cars. The engineering behind the run-flat tire system, the direct injection engines, the electronic parking brake, all of it exists for real reasons and mostly works exactly as intended. The adversary in every single one of these 7 cases was never the car. It was the service department sitting between you and the truth about your own vehicle, betting that you would rather pay than push back. You now know all 7 of the ways that bet gets placed. Ask for the real numbers. Check your own records. Look up your own recalls. And the next time an advisor hands you an invoice full of urgent recommendations, you will know exactly which ones are real and exactly which ones were invented the moment you walk through the door. If this made you angry in a useful way, subscribe. I break down exactly what dealerships do not want you to know every single week, so you walk in prepared instead of exposed.